shall we try and clear up where we've got to here? Can I just first ask one thing? A complaint was made to the Metropolitan Police on the 13th of December last year about Mr Lowe's behaviour. Why is it taking so long for you to do anything about it?
Well, actually, there've been, with regard to the complaint that was made by the chairman, Zia Youssef, actually, there's more than one instance, there's 2 threats. But the key thing is this is actually very sad. It's very unfortunate. And
I want to get onto that, but it just seems 3 months is quite a long time for you to realise that you have an undesirable in your midst.
There's been a variety of instances, and you have to make difficult judgments through the process. But of course, it's unfortunate. Of course, it's difficult. But there are these allegations of bullying by 2 separate female members of staff to the parliamentary authorities. Those clearly have to be dealt with in the proper, responsible way. We've also got a duty of care as a party, whether people are employed directly or indirectly. So that's why the chairman has instructed an independent investigation by a KC. That's the right and proper thing to do. That will run its course. We'd all rather that this happened. But imagine if we hadn't been open and transparent about this. Imagine if we tried to brush it under the carpet and in some way cover it up, and then it came out at a future time. Everybody would have been raging at us.
Well, I don't have to use my imagination. I'm sorry to go on about this, but I do want to ask you about the timing. You know, to people who are cynical, I mean, as you know, I'm not, but someone cynical might say, gosh, nothing happened to this guy until he publicly made a fuss and made disparaging remarks about Nigel Farage, and then within 24 hours he was toast.
But actually,
this is political.
And I'm happy to clarify that. As I say, there was an additional threat that was made about the chairman, Zia Youssef, and you get to a point where you can't tolerate this anymore. And it's really unfortunate, but ultimately, you know, Rupert had been doing some great work on a variety of important issues. But ultimately, if you can't work with someone, if a situation becomes impossible, which regrettably, in our honest opinion, is where it had got to, then you have to say, this is not going to end well. And so we made the right judgment, and Zia and Nigel are doing a brilliant job. They're driving the party forward at incredible pace. We're doing something that's never been done before. We've got 400 branches. We're give or take, leading in the polls. And, of course, with that growth, there are challenges, there are difficulties.
I get the official line, but honestly...
But it happens to be the reality.
Okay, I just want to try one more time. It does feel a bit fishy, doesn't it, that actually the moment he clashes with Nigel Farage, nothing's happened until now, and the moment he clashes with Nigel Farage, suddenly he's disciplined. I mean, let me finish. Your party has made a big deal of your being defenders of free speech. This all feels a bit Putinesque, doesn't it?
Far from it, and that's completely inappropriate. The reality is, behind the scenes, there had been a number of difficulties and challenges, and you get to the point where you say enough's enough, and particularly when you get these allegations of bullying by female staff, and you then get to the point where you've got to launch an investigation, and the chairman's made difficult decisions, and we fully support what he's done on this. And I say there were further allegations, and in a sense, you saw this pattern of behaviour when literally the last moment of the House sitting just before Christmas, I was in the chamber at the adjournment debate, and there was a very unfortunate scene that was briefly reported at the time, but not really picked up, and that was an example. And it was pretty uncomfortable. This is Mr Lowe's
confrontation with Mike
Cain, the minister, in the House of Commons, and it was dealt with by the Speaker's office, and Rupert had to apologise quite properly. But it was a bad moment, and I think just an indication of the challenges that we'd faced.
Your colleague Lee Anderson wrote yesterday that our country must come first.
Absolutely.
And no man is bigger than our party. I think he was probably referring to Mr Lowe. But does that expression, no man, include Nigel Farage?
At the end of the day, the country must come first, because the country's in a terrible state. The Tories have broken Britain. Labour's in the process of bankrupting Britain. We can't keep spending more than we're earning. And the reason we're doing so well in the polls is that we're challenging the consensus narrative on things like mass immigration, on things like net stupid zero, that are destroying the growth of this country, destroying jobs, destroying industries like steel, like the automotive industry. These are the things that we're talking about, and that's why we're doing so well in the polls. And we are united in putting forward a different agenda that I think people want to listen to.
But I'm asking you a serious point, which is really about modern politics and the nature of your party. The part of the division seems to be the question of whether the Reform Party is a party which has a series of personalities, has a structure, a culture of its own, or whether it is, in effect, a one-man band. Would Reform be anywhere near as successful as you're telling me it is without Nigel Farage?
Well, let me remind you that actually it was me that took the party from 0 to about 14, 15%. And then I was delighted that Nigel wanted to get stuck back into politics.
Why did you move over if you were so successful?
Because
he was old news.
Because Nigel's the most experienced, most successful, most recognised politician in the country, and I knew that that would help drive it forwards. We didn't know the pace at which that would happen. But look, we're united, we're working incredibly hard. It's important to be united, and that's why we had to make that difficult decision. Sometimes life is not perfect. None of us are perfect. None of us never make mistakes. But stuff happens, but let's be absolutely clear. We've got to work the hardest, we've got to get the best candidates and the best policies, and if we keep doing that, we'll do well in these May elections, well next May in the devolved nation elections.
I do want to ask you a question about policy, but honestly, there's history here, isn't there? Something like this happened with the Brexit Party. Something like this always happens with Nigel Farage. No doubt, great communicator, big presence and so on, but every party he's been in has founded on
Are you suggesting that there haven't been sort of personality issues between other parties and people?
Yeah, I'm not talking about other. I'm not talking to other parties. I'm talking to you.
You are indeed. But here's the point: no one thought we could get to 25, 26, 27% in the polls, 7% ahead of the Tories as of a poll yesterday. Look, we're doing well. Is it difficult? Yes. Is it right to have scrutiny? Of course it is, because we're suggesting that we could run the country better than the other lot. So that's fair and easy, and we're delighted to have that scrutiny.
If you were going to run the country, you'd be dealing with the biggest problem we have, which is how we deal with Mr. Trump and Ukraine and so on. You're in favour of increased defence spending, but how's your party dealing with Mr. Trump, given that Nigel Farage is conspicuously his best friend?
Well, we're delighted that
his behaviour last week in the Oval Office was OK with you?
I'm delighted that the Prime Minister and the Labour government is now copying reform policy. We were the only party in the election that had 2.5% on GDP within 3 years on defence spending, and then 3% within 6 years. So the Prime Minister's done the right thing in copying that. In the same way, he's doing the right thing announcing today to fire useless civil servants. Again, part of our policy. Look, with regard to Mr. Trump, isn't it a Brexit benefit that we quite rightly have reminded the Prime Minister of, that the PM, on behalf of the country, can help bring people together, European nation leaders and the President of the US.
You were OK with that scene in the Oval Office? You're OK with him saying that Putin is easier to deal with than Zelensky?
Trevor,
you're OK with that?
I've been very clear on the media for the last week, including on Question Time on Thursday night. Those scenes were regrettable, uncomfortable. What I said, and I've said consistently, is, of course, difficult, tense, hard peace negotiations should take place behind closed doors. I've been robustly in support of Ukraine since day one. I'm the guy that donated a five-figure sum 13 months ago, bought a pickup truck, filled it with medical supplies, drove to Ukraine with other volunteers. So, we are robust in that support. But equally, it must be right to have peace, if we can.
Richard Tice, thank you for your time this morning.